The small town of Maplewood was known for its quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and picturesque views of rolling hills. Life moved at a slow pace here, where everyone knew each other by name, and secrets rarely stayed hidden for long. It was the kind of place where people took pride in their traditions, especially weddings. But not all weddings brought joy, and no one understood this better than 14-year-old Rohan Patel. Rohan lived with his father, Arjun Patel, in a modest house on the outskirts of town. His mother had passed away 5 years ago after a brief illness, leaving behind an unfillable void in their lives. Since then, Arjun had thrown himself into work as a mechanic, trying to keep busy while raising Rohan alone. Though he was a good father, there was always a sense of sadness hanging over him, like a shadow that refused to lift. Rohan missed his mom deeply, but did his best to support his dad, even if it meant growing up faster than most kids his age. One evening, as Rohan sat at the kitchen table finishing his homework, Arjun walked in wearing a nervous smile. He cleared his throat before speaking. "Rohan," he began hesitantly, "I have something important to tell you." Rohan looked up from his book, sensing that whatever his dad wanted to say wasn't going to be ordinary. "I've met someone," Arjun continued, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. "Her name is Mira. She's wonderful. We've been seeing each other for a few months now, and I think it's time we make things official. Mira and I are getting married." For a moment, Rohan didn't know how to react. On one hand, he was happy for his dad. If anyone deserved love, it was Arjun. On the other hand, the idea of having a stepmother felt strange. Would Mira try to replace his mom? Could she ever understand what they'd been through? These questions swirled in his mind, but instead of voicing them, he simply nodded. "Okay, Dad," he said softly. "I'm happy for you." Arjun seemed relieved by Rohan's response and hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Beta. You won't regret this. Mira is amazing, you'll see." Over the next few weeks, Rohan got to know Mira better. At first glance, she seemed perfect, kind, beautiful, and attentive. She brought homemade sweets when she visited, asked about Rohan's schoolwork, and even offered to help him with math problems. Everyone who met her couldn't stop praising her. Even Rohan found himself liking her, at least at first. But as days turned into weeks, Rohan started noticing little things that made him uneasy. For instance, Mira never spoke much about her past. Whenever someone asked where she came from, or what her family was like, she would change the subject quickly, laughing it off as though it were nothing. Then there were the phone calls. Late at night, Rohan often heard her whispering urgently into her cell phone, pacing back and forth in her room. Once, when he accidentally bumped into her during one of these calls, she snapped at him sharply, telling him to knock before entering. Rohan tried to brush off these incidents as paranoia, convincing himself that maybe he was just being overly suspicious. After all, Mira treated him well, and his dad seemed happier than he'd been in years. Who was he to question that? Still, curiosity gnawed at him. One afternoon, while Mira was out grocery shopping, Rohan decided to investigate. He told himself it was harmless, just a quick look around her belongings to put his mind at ease. What he found, however, left him stunned. In Mira's closet, tucked away behind neatly folded saris, was a locked box. Rohan hesitated for a moment, unsure whether he should pry further. But something about the secrecy surrounding it compelled him to act. Using a paperclip he found in his dad's toolbox, he managed to pick the lock. Inside the box were stacks of documents, photographs, and letters, all written in a language he didn't recognize. There were also newspaper clippings, yellowed with age, featuring headlines that mentioned fraud, embezzlement, and missing persons. Rohan's heart raced as he flipped through the pages. One photograph caught his attention, a younger version of Mira standing beside a man who bore a striking resemblance to her. Scrawled on the back of the photo in shaky handwriting were the words, "To my dearest brother, forever in debt." The phrase sent chills down Rohan's spine. Who was this man? And why did Mira keep such incriminating evidence hidden away? Before he could process what he'd discovered, Rohan heard the front door creak open. Panicking, he shoved everything back into the box and scrambled to return it to its hiding spot. By the time Mira entered the room, he was sitting innocently on the couch pretending to read a magazine. "Hey, Rohan," she greeted cheerfully, setting down her bags. "What are you doing?" "Just reading," he replied, forcing a smile. "Dad's working late tonight, so I thought I'd wait for him here." Mira nodded, seemingly satisfied with his answer. But as she turned away, Rohan noticed the faintest flicker of suspicion in her eyes. Had she suspected something? Or was he imagining things? That night, Rohan lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered in his mind, refusing to form a coherent picture. Was Mira involved in something illegal? If so, why had she chosen his dad? And most importantly, what should he do about it? He knew he couldn't confront her directly, not without proof. Telling his dad outright might only lead to arguments or worse, disbelief. No, Rohan realized he needed to dig deeper. Whatever secret Mira was hiding, it wasn't going to stay buried forever. And if anyone could uncover the truth, it was him. Little did Rohan know, his investigation would take him down a path filled with danger, betrayal, and revelations that would change his life and his family's forever. The next morning, Rohan woke up with a heavy feeling in his chest. The documents and photographs he had found in Mira's locked box haunted him like shadows lingering in the corners of his mind. He couldn't shake off the nagging suspicion that something was terribly wrong. But now, more than ever, he knew he needed answers. And quickly. If Mira really was hiding something dangerous, every passing day brought her closer to becoming his stepmother. Rohan decided to start small. He began paying closer attention to Mira's behavior, noting even the tiniest details most people would overlook. For instance, she always seemed anxious when Arjun mentioned introducing her to their extended family or friends. She claimed it was because she didn't want to intrude, but Rohan noticed how her hands trembled slightly whenever the topic came up. Then there were the mysterious phone calls that continued late into the night. Once, while walking past her room, Rohan caught fragments of her conversation. Words like deadline, payment, and don't trust them drifted through the door. It sounded nothing like the casual chats she claimed they were. Determined to learn more, Rohan turned to technology. He remembered seeing an old laptop tucked away in the attic, a relic from his dad's college days. Though outdated, it still worked well enough for basic tasks. After sneaking it out during one of Mira's shopping trips, Rohan booted it up and started researching. First, he typed phrases from the newspaper clippings he'd seen in her box into search engines. The results were alarming. One article detailed a massive financial scam involving a woman named Meena Sharma, who had swindled millions from unsuspecting investors before disappearing without a trace. Another piece described a missing person case, linked to a man identified as Rajiv Kumar, the same name scribbled on the back of the photograph Rohan had found. Both cases dated back nearly a decade, yet neither had been resolved. Could Mira be connected to these crimes? And if so, why had she chosen Maplewood, and specifically Rohan's father, as her next target? As the days passed, Rohan grew bolder in his investigation. One afternoon, while Mira was busy cooking lunch, he slipped into her room again. This time he focused on her drawers, searching for anything else that might shed light on her past. In the bottom drawer of her dresser, beneath piles of neatly folded clothes, he discovered a bundle of letters tied together with a red ribbon. Carefully untying the knot, Rohan unfolded the first letter. It was written in English, unlike the foreign language documents he'd seen earlier. The letter was addressed to someone named Rajiv and signed by Meena. As Rohan read through it, his heart sank. The writer spoke of desperate plans to flee the country after being exposed for embezzling funds from a company. She begged Rajiv to help her disappear, promising to repay him once they settled in a new place. The tone was frantic, almost pleading, and it painted a picture of two people willing to do whatever it took to escape justice. Rohan's suspicions hardened into certainty. Mira wasn't just hiding secrets. She was living a lie. Her real name was likely Meena Sharma, and she had manipulated his father into believing she was someone else entirely. But why Maplewood? Why Arjun? Did she plan to use their family as a cover, or was there something more sinister at play? Before he could delve deeper, Rohan heard footsteps approaching. Panicking, he shoved the letters back into the drawer and closed it quietly. Just as he stepped out of the room, Mira appeared in the hallway carrying a tray of snacks. "Oh, Rohan," she said, smiling warmly. "I made some samosas. Would you like to try them?" "Sure," Rohan replied, forcing himself to smile back. "They smell great." He followed her to the dining table, his mind racing. How could he prove what he suspected without tipping her off? More importantly, how could he protect his dad from falling victim to her schemes? That evening, Rohan confided in his best friend Arav over video chat. Arav lived in another town, but had known Rohan since childhood. Despite the distance, their friendship remained strong, and Rohan trusted him completely. "You think Mira's using your dad?" Arav asked, his brow furrowed in concern. "That's crazy." "I know it sounds unbelievable," Rohan admitted, lowering his voice so no one else could hear. "But I've seen the evidence. She's hiding something big, Arav. I just don't know what to do about it." Arav thought for a moment before replying. "Maybe you should talk to someone who knows about these kinds of things, like a detective or something." "A detective?" Rohan echoed, unsure. "I don't even know where to find one." "Well, maybe not a detective," Arav amended. "But what about Mrs. Kapoor? You know, the lady who used to teach history at your school. Didn't she used to work for the police department before retiring?" Rohan's eyes widened. Of course, Mrs. Kapoor was known for her sharp mind and love of solving mysteries. Retired or not, she might be able to offer guidance, or at least point him in the right direction. The following day, Rohan visited Mrs. Kapoor's house under the pretense of borrowing a book. When she invited him inside, he hesitated only briefly before blurting out his concerns. To his relief, Mrs. Kapoor listened attentively, nodding along as he recounted everything he'd uncovered. "This is serious, Rohan," she said finally, her expression grave. "If what you're saying is true, then Mira, or whoever she really is, could be dangerous. But we need concrete proof before taking any action." "What kind of proof?" Rohan asked eagerly. Mrs. Kapoor leaned forward, her eyes narrowing with determination. "We need to dig deeper into her background. Those newspaper articles you mentioned, they're a good start. But we also need to check public records, immigration, databases, anything that can confirm her identity. Do you have access to a computer?" Rohan nodded. "Yes, my dad has one at the workshop." "Good," Mrs. Kapoor said. "Tomorrow, come by my house after school. I'll show you how to look up official records online. But remember, Rohan, this has to stay between us. If Mira finds out what you're doing, it could put you and your father in danger." Rohan swallowed hard, realizing the weight of what he was getting into. Still, he couldn't back down now. Not when his dad's happiness and possibly his safety was at stake. Over the next few days, Rohan and Mrs. Kapoor worked tirelessly to uncover the truth. Using the workshop computer, they accessed government websites and cross-referenced information from various sources. Slowly but surely, a clearer picture began to emerge. Mira's fingerprints matched those of Meena Sharma, the fugitive wanted for fraud. Additionally, records showed that she had entered the country illegally under a fake passport, but perhaps the most shocking discovery was yet to come. While combing through immigration files, Rohan stumbled upon a familiar name, Rajiv Kumar. According to the documents, Rajiv had died in a car accident years ago, but not before leaving behind a will that named Meena as the sole beneficiary of his assets. Among those assets was a significant sum of money stored in offshore accounts. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Mira, or rather Meena, hadn't come to Maplewood out of love for Arjun. She had targeted him because he was vulnerable, lonely, and easy to manipulate. By marrying him, she planned to gain access to his modest savings and use them to launder her stolen wealth. Once she had what she needed, she would vanish again, leaving devastation in her wake. Armed with this knowledge, Rohan faced a difficult decision. Should he confront Mira directly, risking retaliation? Or should he go straight to the authorities and risk breaking his dad's heart? Either way, one thing was certain. The wedding had to be stopped at any cost. Little did Rohan know Mira had already begun to suspect that someone was watching her, and she wasn't about to let anyone stand in the way of her plans, not even a curious teenager. Rohan's heart pounded as he sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at his untouched dinner. The weight of what he had uncovered pressed down on him like a storm cloud threatening to burst. Mira, or Mina, as she was truly known, was not just a liar. She was a predator, carefully weaving her web around Arjun Patel. Every smile, every kind word, every gesture of affection had been calculated steps in a sinister plan. And now, Rohan bore the burden of knowing the truth while his father remained, blissfully unaware. Arjun noticed his son's silence and frowned. "Is everything okay, Beta?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "You've barely touched your food." Rohan forced a weak smile, though his insides churned with anxiety. "I'm fine, Dad, just tired from school." Arjun nodded, accepting the excuse without question. He turned back to Mira, who was seated across the table, sipping tea with an air of calm poise. To anyone else, she appeared to be the perfect partner, attentive, loving, and supportive. But Rohan saw through the facade. Her eyes flickered occasionally toward him, sharp and calculating, as if she could sense that he was on to her. As the evening wore on, Rohan excused himself early, claiming he needed to finish some homework. In reality, he retreated to his room, where he spent hours poring over the evidence he and Mrs. Kapoor had gathered. The documents, photographs, and digital records all pointed to one undeniable conclusion. Mira was a criminal masquerading as a bride-to-be. Yet despite having irrefutable proof, Rohan still struggled with how to proceed. Confronting Mira directly felt reckless. If she suspected even for a second that he knew her true identity, she might retaliate, or worse, disappear before they could expose her. Going straight to the authorities seemed like the safer option, but it came with its own risks. What if they dismissed his claims as mere speculation? Or worse, what if Arjun refused to believe them? Rohan sighed, rubbing his temples. For the first time in his life, he wished his mother were there to guide him. She always knew how to make sense of complicated situations, offering wisdom and comfort when things felt overwhelming. Now faced with a dilemma far beyond his years, he felt utterly alone. The next morning, Rohan decided to seek advice once again from Mrs. Kapoor. After sneaking out during a break between classes, he hurried to her house, clutching a folder filled with the evidence he had collected. When she opened the door, her expression softened upon seeing his anxious face. "You look like you haven't slept," she remarked, ushering him inside. "I haven't," Rohan admitted, sinking into a chair at her dining table. "I don't know what to do, Mrs. Kapoor. I have all this proof, but I'm scared of messing things up. What if I can't stop her?" Mrs. Kapoor placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "First, take a deep breath, Rohan. You've done an incredible job uncovering all of this. Now, we need to think strategically. We can't afford to act impulsively." She spread out the documents on the table, examining each piece of evidence carefully. After several minutes of silence, she looked up at Rohan. "Here's what we'll do. First, we'll compile everything into a single report, something clear and concise that law enforcement officials can review quickly. Then, we'll contact someone trustworthy within the police department, someone who understands the gravity of the situation and won't dismiss your concerns." "But what about my dad?" Rohan asked, his voice trembling. "How am I supposed to tell him the truth without breaking his heart?" Mrs. Kapoor hesitated, her gaze softening. "That part won't be easy, Rohan. No matter how gently you break the news, it will hurt him. But remember this. Your father deserves to know the truth. Keeping him in the dark would only prolong his suffering. Trust me, he'll thank you for saving him in the long run." Though her words offered some comfort, Rohan couldn't shake the image of his father's devastated face. Still, he nodded resolutely. "Okay, let's do it." Over the next 2 days, Rohan and Mrs. Kapoor worked tirelessly to organize the evidence. They created copies of the newspaper clippings, letters, and immigration records, arranging them chronologically to present a coherent narrative. Mrs. Kapoor also drafted a detailed summary outlining Mira's alleged crimes and her connection to the fugitive Meena Sharma. By the end of the second day, they had a comprehensive file ready to present to the authorities. With Mrs. Kapoor's guidance, Roham reached out to Inspector Singh, a respected officer in the local police department, known for his integrity and dedication. Inspector Singh agreed to meet with Rohan privately after learning about the case. When the day arrived, Rohan carried the folder to the station, his palms sweaty and his stomach churning with nerves. Inspector Singh listened intently as Rohan explained everything, occasionally jotting down notes or asking clarifying questions. When Rohan finished, the inspector studied the document silently for several minutes. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply. "This is serious," he said gravely. "If your suspicions are correct, then this woman has committed multiple offenses, including identity fraud and financial crimes. However, we'll need more than circumstantial evidence to build a strong case against her." "What do you mean?" Rohan asked, his voice tinged with desperation. Inspector Singh tapped the folder. "These records are helpful, but they're not enough to secure an arrest warrant. We need something concrete, like surveillance footage, witness statements, or physical proof tying her to these crimes. Do you think you can gather anything else?" Rohan thought for a moment, recalling the mysterious phone calls Mira frequently made late at night. "She talks on the phone a lot," he said slowly. Maybe you could track her calls?" Inspector Singh nodded approvingly. "That's a good idea. Leave that part to us. In the meantime, keep observing her behavior, but be careful. Don't let her suspect that you're onto her, understand?" "Yes, sir," Rohan replied, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in days. Back at home, Rohan found himself walking a tightrope between caution and curiosity. He continued to monitor Mira closely, noting every detail that could strengthen their case. One evening, while helping her set the dinner table, he casually asked, "So Mira, have you always lived in India? You never really talk about your family." Mira stiffened briefly, her smile faltering. "Oh well," she began hesitantly. "My childhood wasn't very interesting. My parents passed away when I was young, and I moved around a lot after that. It's hard to explain." Her evasiveness only fueled Rohan's determination. Later that night, he relayed the conversation to Inspector Singh, who assured him that they were making progress. Meanwhile, the police had begun monitoring Mira's communications, hoping to intercept any incriminating messages. But as the days passed, tension mounted in the Patel household. Mira grew increasingly edgy, snapping at minor inconveniences and disappearing for hours at a time without explanation. Arjun noticed the change in her demeanor, but attributed it to pre-wedding stress. Only Rohan understood the real reason behind her unease. She knew she was being watched. One fateful afternoon, Rohan returned home from school to find Mira packing a suitcase in her room. His blood ran cold as he realized what was happening. She was planning to flee and take whatever she could with her. "Mira," he called out, trying to sound casual. "What are you doing?" She spun around, startled, and quickly zipped up the bag. "Nothing important," she said, forcing a laugh. "Just organizing some old clothes." Rohan's mind raced. He couldn't let her leave. Not now, when they were so close to exposing her. Summoning every ounce of courage, he stepped forward. "I know who you really are," he blurted out, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "And I know what you've done." For a split second, Mira froze, her mask of composure slipping entirely. Then, with a venomous glare, she lunged toward him, grabbing his arm tightly. "You little fool," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've gotten yourself into?" Before she could say more, the sound of sirens pierced the air. Moments later, Inspector Singh and 2 officers stormed into the house, guns drawn. "Step away from the boy," the inspector commanded firmly. Mira released Rohan, her face pale with shock. As the officers handcuffed her, Inspector Singh turned to Rohan, offering a small, proud smile. "You did good, kid. Real good." Arjun stood in the doorway, confusion and disbelief etched on his face. "What's going on?" he demanded, looking from Rohan to Mira and back again. Rohan took a deep breath, bracing himself for the hardest conversation of his life. "Dad," he began softly, "there's something you need to know." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Rohan. Arjun stood frozen, his expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. He glanced at Mira, who was now being led away by the officers, her head bowed in shame. Then he looked back at his son, searching for answers in Rohan's wide, fearful eyes. "Rohan," Arjun said slowly, his voice trembling. "What is happening? Why are the police here? What have you done?" Rohan swallowed hard, his throat dry. This was the moment he had dreaded, the conversation that would shatter his father's trust in Mira and possibly test their relationship. But there was no turning back now. Taking a deep breath, he stepped closer to his dad. "Dad, I didn't want to believe it either," Rohan began, his voice barely above a whisper. "But Mira, she isn't who she says she is. She lied to you. From the very beginning." Arjun shook his head, refusing to accept what he was hearing. "What are you talking about? Mira loves me. She wouldn't—" "She's a fraud, Dad," Rohan interrupted, his voice rising with emotion. Tears welled up in his eyes as he continued. "Her real name is Meena Sharma. She's wanted for stealing millions of dollars from people. She came here to use you, to take your money and disappear again." Arjun staggered backward, sinking into a chair as if the weight of Rohan's words had physically knocked him down. His hands trembled as he covered his face, struggling to process the revelation. For weeks he had believed he had found happiness, a second chance at love. And now in an instant that dream had been shattered. Inspector Singh approached cautiously, sensing the fragility of the situation. "Mr. Patel, we understand this must be difficult for you," he said gently. "But your son did the right thing by coming forward. Thanks to him, we were able to stop someone who could have caused you and others great harm." Arjun looked up at the inspector, then at Rohan, his eyes filled with pain and betrayal. "How long have you known?" he asked hoarsely. "Few weeks," Rohan admitted, guilt washing over him. "I tried to find proof before saying anything. I didn't want to hurt you unless I was sure." Arjun nodded slowly, though the gesture seemed more automatic than genuine. And you're certain about all this?" "Yes, Dad," Rohan replied firmly. "We have documents, records, everything. She even kept letters and photos hidden in her room. She planned to leave once she got what she wanted." For several minutes Arjun sat in silence, staring blankly at the floor. The shock was evident on his face, but beneath it lingered a deeper sadness, the kind that comes not just from betrayal but from the loss of hope. Finally he spoke, his voice heavy with resignation. "Thank you, Rohan. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life." Later that evening, after the police had left and the house had fallen quiet, father and son sat together in the living room. The atmosphere was tense, yet tinged with relief. Arjun held a cup of tea in his hands, though he hadn't taken a sip. Rohan perched nervously on the edge of the couch, unsure of how to bridge the gap between them. "I'm sorry, Dad," Rohan said finally, breaking the silence. "I never wanted to hurt you, I couldn't let her trick you." Arjun sighed deeply, setting the untouched tea aside. "You don't need to apologize, Beta. If anything, I should be thanking you. Without you, I might have ruined my life and yours. But still..." Rohan hesitated, his voice cracking slightly. "I know how much you cared about her. And now, because of me, you'll never be able to trust anyone again." Arjun reached out, placing a hand on Rohan's shoulder. "No, Rohan. Trust isn't something you lose forever. It's something you rebuild, with time, patience, and honesty. Yes, this hurts, but it doesn't mean I'll stop believing in people, or in love. Your mother taught me that. Rohan blinked back tears, overwhelmed by his father's resilience. Despite everything, Arjun remained steadfast, choosing to see the silver lining rather than dwell on the darkness. It was a lesson Rohan knew he would carry with him for the rest of his life. As days turned into weeks, life in the Patel household slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be under the circumstances. News of Mira's arrest spread quickly through Maplewood, sparking gossip and speculation among the townsfolk. Some praised Rohan for his bravery, while others criticized Arjun for being naive. But neither father nor son paid much attention to the chatter. They focused instead on healing together, drawing strength from each other during a time of vulnerability. Inspector Singh visited occasionally to update them on the investigation. According to him, Mira, or Meena, had confessed to her crimes, under interrogation. She admitted to targeting vulnerable men like Arjun, using charm and deception to manipulate them into providing financial support. Her accomplice, Rajiv Kumar, had indeed died years ago, leaving her with access to his offshore accounts. However, greed had driven her to keep moving, always seeking new victims until Rohan intervened. "She underestimated you, Inspector," Singh told Rohan during one of his visits. "She thought you were just a kid who wouldn't notice anything unusual. Instead, you outsmarted her." Rohan smiled faintly, though pride wasn't the emotion he felt most strongly. Relief washed over him every time he thought about how close they had come to disaster. Still, he couldn't shake the lingering unease that came with knowing such evil existed in the world, and that it had almost infiltrated their home. One afternoon, as Rohan helped his dad clean out Mira's belongings, they stumbled upon a small wooden box tucked away in the corner of her closet. Inside was a stack of cash and a handwritten note addressed to Arjun. The note read, "Dearest Arjun, by the time you read this, I will be gone. Please forgive me for lying to you. I never meant to hurt you, it was just business. Take care of yourself and Rohan. You deserve better than me." Arjun stared at the note for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he tore it into pieces and tossed it into the trash. Rohan watched silently, understanding the symbolic act for what it was. Closure. That evening, as they sat down to dinner, Arjun raised his glass in a toast. "To family," he said, his voice steady and warm. "No matter what happens, we'll always have each other." Rohan clinked his glass against his father's, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. Though the scars of betrayal would take time to heal, he knew they would emerge stronger as a team. Together they had faced adversity and triumphed, and together they would continue to build a future rooted in trust, love, and resilience. But little did they know, another chapter of their story was about to unfold, one that would test their bond in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Weeks passed, and the quiet rhythm of life in Maplewood began to return. The initial shock of Mira's arrest faded, replaced by the humdrum routines of daily existence. For Rohan and Arjun Patel, however, the aftermath lingered like an echo that refused to fade completely. Though they had survived the storm together, its impact remained etched in their hearts and their home. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled outside their window, Arjun sat at the kitchen table sipping his tea. Rohan joined him, still sleepy-eyed but eager to start the day. Things between them were different now, not worse but changed. There was a newfound respect in Arjun's gaze when he looked at his son, mixed with gratitude for the courage Rohan had shown. And Rohan, in turn, felt closer to his father than ever before, as though they had weathered not just a crisis but a shared battle. "You know," Arjun said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "I've been thinking about something." "What, is it, Dad?" Rohan asked, curious. "I think it's time we did something special, for us. Something to remind ourselves that no matter what happens, we can move forward." Rohan tilted his head, intrigued. "Like what?" Arjun smiled faintly. "A trip somewhere far away from here, just you and me." The idea lit up Rohan's face instantly. "Really? Where would we go?" "How about Kerala?" Arjun suggested. It's been years since I visited my hometown, and you've never seen it. We could spend some time with your grandparents, explore the backwaters, eat all the food your mom used to love. Rohan nodded enthusiastically. The thought of visiting Kerala filled him with excitement, not just because it sounded fun, but because it represented a fresh start. Leaving behind the shadows of the past, even if only temporarily, felt like exactly what they needed. 2 weeks later, father and son boarded a train bound for Kerala. As the landscape shifted from bustling cities to lush green fields dotted with coconut trees, Rohan pressed his face against the window, marveling at the beauty outside. For the first time in months, he felt truly free, a weight lifted off his shoulders. When they arrived at their destination, Rohan's grandparents greeted them with open arms. Their house, nestled amidst rice paddies and banana plantations, exuded warmth and simplicity. Every corner seemed infused with memories of Arjun's childhood and glimpses of the woman Rohan's mother had once been. Over the next few days, Rohan immersed himself in the charm of rural Kerala. He helped his grandmother cook traditional meals, learned how to climb coconut trees from his grandfather, and explored the serene backwaters on a wooden boat. But the highlight of the trip came one evening when Arjun took him to a secluded beach. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Arjun turned to Rohan with a thoughtful expression. "Do you remember the stories your mom used to tell you about this place?" Rohan nodded, recalling bedtime tales of waves whispering secrets and stars guiding lost travelers home. "She said this beach was magical," he replied softly. "She was right," Arjun said, smiling. "Your mom always believed in magic, in hope. Even after she passed, her spirit stayed with us, reminding us to keep going no matter how hard things got." Rohan felt tears prickling his eyes but blinked them away quickly. "Do you think she'd be proud of me, Dad? For stopping Mira? Arjun placed a hand on his shoulder, his touch firm yet gentle. "Proud doesn't even begin to describe it, Beta. You didn't just protect our family. You showed incredible strength and wisdom. She'd be bursting with pride." For a moment, neither spoke. They simply stood there side by side, listening to the rhythmic crash of the waves. It was a moment of connection, unspoken yet profound. A reminder that while people may leave, their love endures. Back in Maplewood, life continued to evolve in unexpected ways. News of Rohan's bravery spread beyond gossip circles, earning him admiration from teachers, classmates, and neighbors alike. Some even jokingly referred to him as Detective Rohan, a title he accepted with shy humility. More importantly, his actions inspired others to speak up about injustices they witnessed, creating ripples of change throughout the community. Meanwhile, Inspector Singh kept Arjun updated on the progress of Mira's case. According to reports, she had struck a deal with prosecutors, agreeing to testify against her former accomplices in exchange for a reduced sentence. While justice was being served, Arjun chose not to dwell on the details. Instead, he focused on rebuilding his life and ensuring that Rohan grew up surrounded by positivity and trust. One afternoon, as Rohan flipped through old photo albums in the attic, he stumbled upon a picture of his parents on their wedding day. In it, they looked so happy, so full of promise. A pang of longing hit him, but it wasn't sadness, it was gratitude. Gratitude for the love they had shared and for the legacy they had left behind. "Hey, Dad," Rohan called out, holding up the photograph. "Look at this." Arjun climbed the stairs, smiling as he saw the image. "Ah, yes, that was a good day." "Do you think Mom knew then how much we'd miss her?" Rohan asked quietly. Arjun hesitated, then nodded. "I think she did. But I also think she knew we'd find ways to carry on, to honor her memory by living fully and loving deeply." Rohan smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. His mother's presence might have been invisible, but it was undeniable. Her strength lived on in him, guiding him through challenges and triumphs alike. Months turned into years, and Rohan grew into a young man defined not by fear or bitterness, but by resilience and compassion. He excelled in school, pursued his someday passion for writing, and became a role model for younger kids in the neighborhood. Arjun, too, found joy in new beginnings, eventually opening a small garage where he repaired cars and taught mechanics to aspiring apprentices. Though scars from the past remained, they served as reminders of lessons learned and battles won. Together, father and son proved that no obstacle was insurmountable, not when faced with unity, courage, and love. And so, as Rohan stood on the threshold of adulthood, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, he carried with him the knowledge that he was never alone. Whether facing heartbreak or celebrating victories, he had a family, living and remembered, that would forever stand by his side. In the end, it wasn't just about uncovering the truth. It was about finding light in the darkest moments and holding on to hope no matter how faint it seemed. Because sometimes the greatest triumphs come not from defeating others but from rising above adversity, together.